That's actually what we're building out today. In the struggles and challenges that we're running into with that is just, it's crazy. But I think, like looking ahead, if we can figure out a way to do it for everything, we've really leveled up our program and really taken our maturity to the next level, as I'll call it, because then we're preventing these things from happening, whether it be intentional or accidental, right? And so, like I mentioned, right now we're completely reactive. And this takes us into proactive territory, whereas like that's where we're trying to get all of the aspects of our team.
Welcome to the Head of the Breach podcast. I'm your host, Casey Kimler, where we talk everything offensive security. I'm here today's guest, DK Koran. DK is a seasoned security engineer with 15 years of experience in the security industry, spanning various sectors from fintech to automotive. Over the last few years, DK has specialized in leading red teams and application security at NerdWallet as the business information security officer. Welcome, DK. Let's give our audience a little bit of background about who you are and how you got into penetration testing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in security or security engineering along with pen testing for about 15 years. The interesting part of my story, probably about 10 years ago, I got into pen testing mostly out of interest and just a hobby. I loved it. It was cool. It was a big, sexy thing, right? Everybody wanted to do it. And so I got into it, and I got into it in a really interesting way professionally. After kind of honing my skills, I got hired on to pen test like Internet of Things devices, critical infrastructure devices, SCADA, and automobiles. And I did that for a number of years, there for a while. And then I was tired of breaking and seeing the same things over and over again. I think you could get that pretty regularly with pen testers. And I wanted to stop it from happening. So I moved over to application security and focused entirely on web application pen testing as my career there. And then about a year ago, I now manage an AppSec team. So I manage them. And as part of my AppSec team, I also started a red team. So guiding my red teaming internally has been a nice venture, a nice change also.
Sweet. I'm going to ask you some questions about that, man, team, stuff like that. But let's first dive into the fact that, let's not skip over that you did some IoT, automobiles, and critical infrastructure. So like, what were some of the things that you were discovering with that? And give us an idea of some awesome findings and some of the repeat findings that you saw.
Sure. So I don't know, a number of years ago, I don't know if you remember, Wired and Andy Greenberg did the whole Jeep hacking thing where they remote controlled a Jeep through means, right? So that was really popular. So that's about when I was doing this. And the thing about cars, I'm going to start there, is cars back then, like nobody ever cared about security. Like it runs a bus, you tell the bus what to do, and it generally does it. So like the progression of things with like an automobile, when you're kind of learning that, it's like, okay, can I make the lights blink? Can you make the lights blink? Okay. And then it's figuring out how to get over some of the safety controls involved. Like, okay, how do I rev the engine or turn the steering wheel? And what that ultimately ends up being, and what you ultimately end up figuring out, is like how simple a car really is and how dumb it really is from a technology point of view. And so it's kind of becomes a race of like, what can I figure out before somebody might notice, right? And the easiest way, I'm going to back up slightly though, to get on the bus, like getting on the bus is actually the hardest part, but it's in modern cars. Think about how like connected they are. You have like OnStar, some of them have cell networks now, Bluetooth, tire pressure sensors, really any sensor that's remote, like your tire sensors are a big one because they're completely wireless and they give off a frequency, right? So if you can get in through there, breaking in through the tire monitor, you can get on the bus and then proceed to tell it to do whatever you want. It's interesting. And the thing I have to preface the users and everybody listening with is cars have come a long way since I've done this. I also want to talk about some good things that have happened. And I'll get into some of my interesting findings in a second. I know you asked me about that. But right about the time that I was working on this, cars started to actually encrypt their bus, which is a huge change, and it makes it harder, right? Because then now you're dealing with encryption, and we all know what that's like. So there are things that have changed, and my information is a little bit dated. But the most fun I ever had is I have to be careful because I'm under NDA for this, but we had a police cruiser, and a certain state in the US was like, what can you do? And so we made a little piece of malware. So when you would plug it in, because police cruisers have the laptop and then some of them have USB ports, just like normal cars. So we created a piece of malware that when you plug it in the USB stick, classic like Stuxnet, like find a USB and plug it in, that we could completely remote control the car because of either through Bluetooth or the tire sensors, because the police cruisers also have really intense radio. So like you think the giant antennas, right? That was like another way that we could also get in and control the car. Now, the sad part about it is we never got into like a cell network or like North Star, for example. So we had to go through these kind of rudimentary means, but ultimately it let us we never got on the laptop, which was my biggest, hurt my soul a little bit. Like going from like a USB in the dash to the laptop would have been the sickest thing in the world to get on like a police network, right? We never actually made that leap, but we were able to control the car much like you saw, like I referenced earlier in Andy Green's, where we turned the sirens on, talk through the megaphone, stuff like that. So that was probably my biggest stunt hacking thing that I did with that.
You would be the coolest person at a party, say, hey, look at this trick. There's a cop car sitting outside. Let me talk from it.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. Is just incriminate myself. Some cop sitting in his car and I start going over the megaphone to tell people what to do.
That's some pretty cool stories. Like everyone says, the IoT hacking, even still to this day, a little bit like the 1990s hacking.
Oh, it is. Oh, I didn't touch on that. Yeah. So IoT stuff is terrifying. So a lot of them have such like rudimentary and terrible web servers running on them that like circumventing admin controls is trivial. And so like routers, smart plugs, and like controlling all of those is crazy easy. But the biggest step is you have to be on the network that they're on, right? So like if I wasn't on the Wi-Fi network, I would have to break the Wi-Fi. And I never really got very good at that. So we were always testing as if we were on the same network. So that is a caveat I have to say that from my experience is that it was interesting. The scariest stuff was when I was doing like SCADA and critical infrastructure, because a lot of the time that I was doing this testing, I don't know if you remember like WannaCry, NotPetya, all those old school, and then Russia was shutting down Ukraine's power grid. And so that's where a lot of this testing that I ultimately ended up doing came from. And I think the scary part is just like how easy it is. And they really designed the devices to be dumb, for lack of a better way to describe it. Like they're supposed to be like plug and play, easy to get on and like control remotely and make those types of engineers' lives better, right? And it was terrifying to see the real world implication of it in other countries, but then to like see it firsthand that it's so easy and how like simple it was, to the point where like I really put my tinfoil hat on at this point in my career, because I was like, I can't own IoT devices. Like I can't have anything automated. Like they're going to get in and like, the hat's really going wild. But yeah, the real takeaway, if I were to dumb it down like into one sentence, is just how simple those devices are and how little thought at that time in our lives, 2018, 2019, 2020, it really was to do.
Yeah, you could go buy something off of the shelf like at a Best Buy and be like, what is this thing? It connects to the internet, and you could open it up and probably find a handful of vulnerabilities in less than an hour, right? It like that seemed to be at that time, that era where just IoT was coming out. Like your toaster's connected to the internet, every kitchen appliance is connected to the internet, and even today I kind of wear that tinfoil hat still, because I just don't know how well that's improved. So I just assumed it has not improved that much as well as maybe cars, but I could be wrong. I don't live IoT day to day anymore.
I'd like to believe. I'd like to hope. I don't know. And maybe it's just fool's hope, but
I talk to too many friends that, squash that hope, that do that testing, frequently. And I was like, that's still possible.
I won't lie, I'm kind of glad I'm out of it. I have like negligence or ignorance is bliss mindset right now. I think that's what we're touching on, but it feels good to like just assume. I assume it's bad, and I'm just like, okay, this is the state of the world now.
So you pivoted into application security.
Yeah, I wanted to build stuff.
Just opportunity, or did you just kind of want to head that way? That interests you next?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I kind of hinted at it earlier. I saw a lot of the same things, even across Internet of Things devices, the same findings, session tokens and URLs, stupid, like really low level stuff. And I was kind of like, all right, I want to stop this from happening. And I'm kind of like, okay, early in my career, I was in operations, and I was like, okay, well, I don't want to do operations again. I want to take the experience that I have with offensive security and apply it to a way that I can prevent these things from happening. So I was looking to get into a product or application security, and I was lucky enough to get a gig, and I worked at GoFundMe for a while, which isn't an Internet of Things devices, which was on purpose. I wanted to move more into the web application space, and I was there for a while. But yeah, I was just looking for a change. I was looking to make a difference in a different way in my head.
Yeah, that makes sense. You see all the vulnerabilities with the software. It's like, how can I get closer to the software to prevent these things being discovered? So you were working internally for an organization, doing application security. Now, fast forward to today, you lead a teams that do a lot of proactive security. So what's that like?
So my application security team and my red team are same, but different. So it's the same engineers. And what we're doing on the application side is very classic. We're starting to get to the point in our maturity where we're starting to do like interesting automated type enforcement, or guardrails is a good way to think about it. A lot of what I did up until this point was getting the basics in place, all your classic tooling, all your classic monitoring, alerting. And we needed to do some of that due diligence for a while. But today, one of the things I'm most excited about on the applications side is we're looking to automate guardrails for we call them guardrails, but they're requirements for various web applications, whether it has a database or certain front end, certain languages. We have these requirements that teams have to meet. But we have no way of enforcing that right now. It's all of if we find it or if we check it, right?
So did you build those rules out essentially?
That's what we're doing today. That's actually what we're building out today. In the struggles and challenges that we're running into with that is just, it's crazy. But I think, like looking ahead, if we can figure out a way to do it for everything, we've really leveled up our program and really taken our maturity to the next level, as I'll call it, because then we're preventing these things from happening, whether it be intentional or accidental, right? And so, like I mentioned, right now we're completely reactive. And this takes us into proactive territory, whereas that's where we're trying to get all of the aspects of our team. So yeah.
What do you foresee changing in the proactive offensive area specific to applications?
Mostly denying things from getting to production. I mean, at the root of it, that's what I'm trying to stop people from not meeting our requirements, getting to customer facing, and then putting our customers at risk. It's about curbing the risk to our customers by getting ahead of it. And I like to say whether it's accidental or on purpose, because let's face it, the shadow stuff always happens, right? And we're trying to prevent that. And this is just one of the means that we're preventing. Now, if I were to sidestep the question a little bit, is one of the other things we're doing that is design reviews. So that's one other way that we're trying to get it. But the probably run into it, the design reviews, is then enforcement again. And so if we have these guardrails, then we're enforcing the things we require in our design reviews from happening. So it's kind of like twofold.
Yeah. Is your team mostly spending their time hunting proactively? I mean, are they still building out those guidelines and rules, or are they in meetings, architecture stuff and with engineers? Where do they spend most of their day to day right now?
Day to day right now is one of the things you mentioned is are we still building guardrails? Yes. One of my big initiatives for the remainder of this year is to where are holes for requirements. So that's one thing that we're going to start work on very soon. Hasn't happened yet. Where we're at with the automated enforcement is where are we going to have these controls? So the discussions I'm having is where is the place that makes the most sense? Because do we, in classic AppSec fashion, how far left do we shift? And where do we
shift left thing?
Yeah, shift left thing, whatever that is. But it's just basically right now we're having discussions of where do these fit in for certain requirements, because we have them for infrastructure, and the infrastructure work is happening right now and is actually easier than the application side because it's tangible. It's does this S3 bucket is it public? Yes, no. You know what I mean? So the infrastructure side is actually, they've moved quite far ahead. And I want to give kudos to the infrastructure team for that, because they thought of it, and I'm piggybacking off that idea for application security. But for us, we haven't actually built any guardrails yet. It's where, as I keep alluding to. And then the holes in our guardrails is another initiative that we have going on.
In that initiative, you're going to pick it up with that proactive testing, essentially, right? You hit staging or UAT or something, and you're going to test to see okay, what got past the guardrails?
Yeah, so there's like two ways that we're kind of looking at this and where we integrate it. And the first is we're going as so far left as in the PR actually. So creating like our own type of GitHub Actions or something similar where we're testing it in the delta of a PR is one idea they have. The other one that we're thinking is creating more traditional like unit and regression testing in the build process and what we use for that. So that's what we're exploring right now.
So like, are you going as far as like doing it on the client side? So they, when they can't even create the PR if it fails the test or something?
Oh man, that'd be a hoop dream. Like a pre-commit hook type thing. That's definitely an interesting idea. I haven't thought about that, but
yeah, I've talked to some that have done the pre-commit hook. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. And that I thought was pretty interesting. Actually, the way I learned about it is one organization being like, we put these in play thinking these are awesome. And they're like, we have a bunch of developers that are trying to thwart it. To submit. I was like, oh, geez.
yeah.
It's all over. But I thought that was a really interesting way of tackling that.
I definitely am not against exploring writing something. Where that in my mind gets really interesting is the rollout and enforcement, like you kind of alluded to. Like, how do I make sure all of my developers and software engineers or engineers in general have it installed and that it's working and configured?
Yeah.
Especially if like we write it, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I actually think I might add this to my list now that you mentioned it of like things to explore because it would work, right? It would work, at least to some degree.
If implemented correctly, I think it could have some good benefits.
That's always a caveat, right? Is it implemented correctly? Is it configured correctly? Yeah.
Many times what we see to kind of go back to what you're saying is, infrastructure is gotten a little bit of a handle with the guardrails and things like that. But I'll tell you one thing that we've been seeing since we're in a position to test continuously over and over. We see some interesting changes, like something will get deployed to production and we'll find a vulnerability, right? So it might have missed those guardrails or whatever. And so we discover some sort of security vulnerability, whatever it may be. And then it'll be fixed. And it's like, awesome, sweet. Things will be closed. And 2 months later, the same exact thing will pop up. And it's like, okay, let's talk about how we actually fix that, right? Oh, no. The Docker container, no one updated the pipeline, to do this. We just fixed that, right? And so, maybe it's just because we're uniquely positioned to kind of constantly be checking those same things. But man, are we finding that happening more and more? And it kind of reminds me back in the olden days where, someone accidentally put the any firewall rule in or foobar firewall rule manually, but now it just happens so much quicker because of, infrastructure is code, everything goes through a pipeline, and you touch anything outside the pipeline, you're going to have this regression problem. Do you have any of those challenges or?
Yeah, yes, we do. And so we give an insane amount of power to our developers to create their own infrastructure. We went with that. I don't know if you heard of the like single threaded teams model, came out of Amazon, but the idea is you give autonomy to the individual, we'll call them verticals, and they are supposed to have complete control over their infrastructure and what they do. And so where we run into issues with what you're explaining is we have what we call like a core engineering, which people can just use. And that's gone through all the reviews. It's gone through hardening, like all your classic infrastructure security type stuff, all your network hardening and stuff like that. But they're also allowed to like do their own thing if they want. And so you're saying, oh, these problems come up over and over again. Well, we run into a situation that's same, but different in the sense of like they're doing their own thing. And now we need to figure out what's happening. What are they doing? Why is it here? What are they trying to accomplish? So we see more of that happening over and over again, rather than like our entire web application and deploying it and putting the same hole in over and over again. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. What other challenges do you have, with leading teams, security teams in general?
Well, I mean, with management, it's always people. And I'm not sure we should dive into that too much. But from a technical point of view, my biggest challenge right now is with my red team. And I know you had asked about that. So my red team evolved from an idea that I got from working with you guys. So we were leveraging Sprocket in a way where we were doing these tiny little tests pretty frequently, almost every month. And I was like, you know what? We can do this and we have access to more. right, than you do. Like you don't have access to our code base or anything like that. And so I started the red team, and the challenge has been growing and finding what we should be testing. Like what should I be looking at? Because now the skills I have on my red team is wide ranging, and they're all developing and they're all growing. So like the skills is always one thing, but for me, it's like, what is the most important thing that I should be looking at right now? And it's constantly evolving with that. Because it's a new red team and I've never actually been on a red team, this is my first time running one, it's figuring out how to keep them busy, for lack of a better way to describe it, and keep them finding things. And then it's about a people problem of establishing like my red team, and this is what we do, and this is what we're trying to accomplish, going to the software developers and be like, hey, this is what we found now. The managers, they all know before we do an assessment. I can talk about our evolution of how we figured that out here in a second too. But right now, our biggest thing is keeping the red team busy and then getting the teams to patch the things that they find. We're very much in our infancy is the maturity of a red team.
That's really interesting, because it's like they're your eyes and ears, right, out there testing stuff, and like what should we be testing? What's the frequency? Because you can't do it yourself anymore, right? You can't look in all the places and know and say, hey, what should we test? What are you seeing through your eyes and ears, right? So I really like the idea of saying, like, what should we be testing for and using the team to help figure that out. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been a cool ride for us in particular, because the most recent one we did was with an AI tool, classic buzzword, right? It's a chatbot. And so prompt injection. So my engineers for the first time got to be like, ooh, I get to test out what all these people have been talking about with prompt injection. And it's actually been our most fruitful testing that we've done. We've been doing this red team for about 6 months, and it's been the most prolific, and unfortunately, I'll say, but we found the most. But it's been so cool, right? Because we got to bring in our AI experts on the security team, and the AI experts are advising the red team's taking their prompt injection, and we had this beautiful melody, I'll call it, where the two of them were working together, and they found all sorts of wild stuff. And it was just awesome. It's like, okay, yes, we're fine. We're doing something. We're helping. This hasn't been to prod yet. So like, this is perfect. We've actually curbed this from happening to any of our customers, things like that. Because I can't go into super into the specifics, but like, it's your classic, like pulling way too much data, the AI hallucinating, giving way too much or not, stuff that makes no sense. It was cool. It was super, super interesting when I was getting the presentation and they're walking me through all of this stuff that they found. I was just like, oh my God, thank God we did this.
That's awesome. And that's been pretty fruitful for us as well. And many chatbots out there that have existed have been installed and embedded on these websites. But look what's happened in the past, a few years, like all these AI tools have come out. So like the back-end engines powering a lot of these chatbots have been like swapped out and replaced or added new AI functionality. Mm-hmm. And this all of a sudden prompt injection wasn't a thing. Now it's the same chatbot, but underneath the hood, it's a different engine. Now prompt injection's there. And so it's like, it's crazy. It's like now when we test this at scale, it's like we need to go back, find all the chatbots. Okay, test all the chatbots for prompt. It's been fun.
It's just like, all right, so when I was reviewing their findings, I felt like I was in early 2000s again.
Yeah, right.
Do you remember like back in the day, like when I was learning pen testing back then, and it was like, the damn vulnerable web app and like, what were the other ones? There were plenty, and it's like really rudimentary like findings, and it felt like that's what we were doing.
Yeah, we're catting past WD, right?
Yeah, like in the web application world, in the real world, we fairly gotten rid of SQL injection for the most part, right? We can pretty much say, but like here we were doing it in a chat bot, and it's spewing out all this information, and it's crazy. It was super awesome. I'm so glad they got to do it as a manager, because it's cool, it's new, and they'll use that. But then thank God from a business perspective, that we did this before we went live with anything. Yeah.
What else do you want to share with our listeners? Any challenges that you've been faced with? We've talked about a lot of those. Any takeaways that you've learned in the past, I don't know, say 6 months that's worth sharing?
Yeah, I definitely can. There's a lot of things. I think when you're working in application security, so I'm going to transition back to the web the application hat. It's the thing that I think I've learned the most, and the biggest challenge is again, it's people, but it's a relationship. I think that I run into security engineers who are like, security, 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 only security, nothing else matters, right? They get really ingrained in that philosophy, and they forget that the people they're dealing with are also people, and have their own roadmap and their own people to deal with. And so I'm bringing all of this up because it's one of the challenges I run into with a couple of my engineers, because they still have that like security, security, security mindset. And I'm like, no, you have to have some empathy for the people that you're dealing with. And what I found, where I'm going with all of this, and my biggest learning in the last year, I'll call it, is the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we asking teams to do this? Why are we asking them to participate in security events? And once we start including the why in all of the stuff we're doing with like details, like teams were much more receptive to the things that we were wanting to do. Now, truth be told, I'm a little embarrassed to say that it took me like 14 years to figure that out, but damn, I'm glad I did, because it's really changed our relationship with our software developers, because they're understanding the why. It's not just being forced down their throats, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, you're probably in a position to actually see, the fruits of that, right? Of asking why, and then also, seeing the business aspect of it, and how understanding the why and understanding the relationships has a better overall business impact than just saying no.
Yeah. Not the no guys. I refuse my team to be the no guys. No, that's not allowed. Always ask questions. Yeah, I think, I in the past year has been big for me personally, because I went from an IC role to now a manager role. So there's been a lot of growth for me there. And the challenges there that I'm realizing from a security point of view is, myself included in this, I feel like security engineers like to keep evolving and keep learning and always have new challenges. And I think as a manager of these folks now, it's like finding those opportunities for them, whether it be through building new things or solving hard problems. And that has forced me to think differently, as even in a security hat, of like, okay, what is my next 3 steps so that I can keep my team moving forward, growing professionally, enhancing their skills, all of those things. That's been a personal thing that for me has been a challenge, but I'm really, really enjoying it. And I think I just love seeing it come to life and seeing them learn and like achieve the things they want. Like, I don't know, an easy one that's tangible is like a couple of members of my team want the OSCP, right? Big fancy certification, right? And just seeing their evolution of their skills as they're studying for this, that it applies to their personal growth as well as their professional growth. So
yeah, and that's not an easy one to get. That's pretty cool.
It's changed a lot since I took it, but yeah, I took it. This is how old I am. I had to do buffer overflow.
Yeah. Me too. So, do you not have to do that anymore?
Buffer overflow?
Yeah. Do you not have to do the buffer overflow anymore in the course?
No, it's an Active Directory challenge now.
Cool. Yeah. A lot of our listeners are literally going through some of that, right? They're IC transitioning into leadership or management. And so I know, talking to some of them, one of the struggles that they had was giving up that IC. And I think it's because as a tester, it's such a technical role, and you're used to like learning something new all the time and challenging yourself, and then switching that challenge from such a technical thing to such a mental thing, really. Mm-hmm. Have you had any struggles with that? I mean, how have you been adapting? I mean, how often are you in front of the console slinging code anymore, diving deep?
Not as much as I like. I went through the transition that I think every IC goes through. For me, I'll walk through kind of my evolution of my mindset. When I became a manager, I'm like, I don't provide any more value, because I always attributed the things I was producing as my value to the company. And really, you're changing careers in my mind from an engineer to a manager. You're no longer an engineer, you're a manager. So I in my head, when I made that transition and I said, okay, now my value is developing people and developing talent and, getting projects done and all of that too. But like, once I accepted that my new job is that, and that my job is no longer writing scripts or exploiting a web app or getting cross-site scripting in some stupid chat forum or something. Like, once I accepted that in my mind, like a whole new world opened up, because you said as engineers, we like to keep learning, right? Well, now the things I learn are leadership, managing people, managing emotions. It's different. So now I'm devouring all this new information that I ignored for 15 years because it wasn't important to me. And it's just different. It's not nuts and bolts of code. It's essentially how to manage people. And so that was like my evolution. Because when I first started, like, I was like, what am I doing? Like I hate this. I don't want to do it. Fast forward a year, I'm like, I love this. I love figuring out how to grow people. And
Yeah.
it's been a cool evolution. Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. A great way to end it too. So DK, if anyone wants to follow you, your work, or get in touch with you, how could they do so?
I'm on LinkedIn. So yeah, everybody calls me DK. My name's Dave Koran. I'm on LinkedIn. I work at NerdWallet. I'm allowed to say that. So that's how you can find me. Reach out on LinkedIn. Say you heard me on this podcast, and I'll get you in touch with me in a way that is a little bit easier. But I'm not in any other socials. I'm graybeardy in that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, now that you made the transition from IC, to leadership and management, you need to be on LinkedIn.
I'm on LinkedIn, but no, I'm not on Twitter or any of those, or X, excuse me. I'm very like old white beard guy in that regard. But
well, cool. Hey, DK, thanks again for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Thank you.